There's a documentary on Netflix. Don't know if you've watched it yet. It's called Don't F with Cats.
And this has nothing to do with the musical or the new movie.
No, it doesn't. So you can't, I mean, do you want to do acid before you watch this? You shouldn't. So Evan tells us about it first. Like, I was watching this over the holidays. He goes, this is pretty messed up. We found ourselves sucked into it, and now we're like, man, this is messed up. And we sort of knew the story, and maybe you remember it as well, but it takes some crazy turns. It's about a murderer in Toronto. He is from Toronto. He does the murder in Montreal. But it starts off initially where this guy makes a video of him doing a horrible thing to some cats. And people online saw the video and they went nuts. And they're like, we're going to catch this bastard. How dare he do that to cats?
The internet is boundless. There's the happy places. And then there's another part of the internet, the seedy underbelly. I was on Facebook one day.
And then I found this video. I pressed play.
It was the worst video I've ever seen.
He needs to be stopped immediately.
People went nuts. So we started looking. He could have been anywhere on the planet.
This person wants to play a game of cat and mouse, and I'm up for that. There's a lot of information in the video. You see a door handle, electrical receptacles.
Everything pointed to North America. But then
you hear some voices.
He was Russian.
Oh, maybe he's located in Russia.
Thousands of people looking to find this guy. There was a tidal wave of leads that were coming in.
I wasn't gonna stop until I found him.
Clearly, this video is not the end.
Something bad is about to happen. He's gonna kill somebody. All of a sudden, another video appears. My mind doesn't want to believe it's true.
These are the things, the telltale sign of somebody that's going to become a serial killer.
We had a ticking time bomb on our hands.
Twisted story that keeps twisting.
What I'm seeing is impossible.
He's going to get the attention of the world now.
2 mysterious packages.
Le dépeceur de Montréal.
An international manhunt.
This isn't the first time. It's not going to be the last time. This is going to get progressively worse.
In the seedy underbelly of the internet, there's an unwritten rule. Rule 0. Don't f with cats.
It's insane. It's dark. It is dark. Yeah. They go deep into the internet to try to find this guy. So he does this horrible thing to some cats, and they started looking around the room on the video that he posted. And remember, it's a pretty grainy video, and it mostly focuses on the idiocy he's doing. But there was like a little vacuum cleaner in the corner. So these people online, they're like, that vacuum cleaner, I think we could find out how, or at least maybe find out where he's from by way of that vacuum cleaner. This is Deanna Thompson.
Wow.
Holy shit, that's a yellow vacuum cleaner. First thing, yellow vacuum. Okay, there's tons of them. One thing that I learned in all of this is that there's an internet forum for everything out there. Are you into vacuums? There's going to be an internet forum for it. So I found this vacuum cleaner repair forum. Thousands of people post, I've got this tube, I'll send it to you. You know, I've got this hose, I can send it to you. So I posted to this vacuum forum, hey guys, they identified it immediately. The Kenmore canister cleaner, the Aspiradora model, 721-26082.
Wow.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. You've been so great to me. I can't appreciate it enough. Oh, you're welcome, sweetheart. Hey, and just so you know, that's only sold in North America.
It's only sold in North America. And only serial killers tend to buy that particular brand, sweetheart. Just wanted to let you know.
Knowing the internet, I really thought, hey, sweetheart, by the way, and send her a D pic.
You're right.
But suck on this vacuum.
Good Lord. So they begin to realize that this guy, you know, has some ties to Toronto. And here's Deanna talking about now the tie when they finally figured out the guy's not just from North America, he's probably from Toronto.
But we eventually found an article written in the Toronto Sun, which is kind of like a tabloidy, kind of gossipy rag, by a guy named Joe Warmington.
I was on my way home from work when I was listening to a popular radio program, and all I heard was this frantic voice that was calling into this radio show. And what he was upset about was the fact that he said on the internet, people were linking him romantically with Karla Homolka. Now, if you say the name Karla Homolka here in Canada, that will get the hair on the back of your neck standing up, because she is the most hated woman in Canada. She is the wife of a serial killer, Paul Bernardo. They're known as the Ken and Barbie killers.
I started to believe that he used his sock puppet accounts to start creating these rumors himself. Like, why would you want to associate with a serial killer?
Right. That's a great question.
Right.
He's got problems, obviously.
Yes, you're bent already here.
Luca Magnotta is his guy's name. He, started posting these, had a bunch of fake accounts all across the internet, pictures of himself, things that he posted. He posted at one point how to disappear, which they used a little bit later on. But yeah, then he started this rumor that he was dating Karla Homolka. And she asked a great question. Why the hell would you want to be associated with Karla Homolka?
Yeah, who starts that rumor?
Right? She's
it's
insane.
Like I'm dating Charlie Manson.
Right, exactly. But this is a person who wanted attention, and again, the screw wasn't twisted quite right. So they learned that this guy, this columnist in Toronto for the Toronto Sun, Joe Warmington.
You mean the tabloidy trashy rag?
We're going to talk to him in a second. He's the one who finds out that this guy was the one who was calling the radio station, and then he's like, well, I got to talk to this guy. I got to bring him on. And so they get him into the offices of the Toronto Sun, and they meet him, and they also are like a little unnerved by the guy, right? Like, some ain't right.
Well, they knew that going in, right?
Well, see, up to this point, Luca hasn't killed anybody just yet.
Right, but we know about the claims of connections with Karla.
Right, and that's enough to freak you out all the way around, right? So they call him up, and he was more than willing, by the way. More than willing to come on and just start talking.
Because he wanted the platform. That becomes very clear early on into this. He wants any sort of recognition he can get without being directly linked to these.
Hence video, calls to radio shows.
Yes.
Right, exactly. I mean, at this point, he wants the recognition. So Joe joins us this morning from Toronto. Joe, thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
Well, good. I was just telling your producer, obviously we're not good because of the horrible plane crash that, killed 63 Canadians, but really everybody on that flight, 138, were supposed to be landing at Pearson here in Toronto. They have some connection to Canada, so it's a really, really sad time for us.
I was trying to have Joe come on yesterday. We're going to talk to him beforehand, and he told me, he goes, right now we're kind of busy at the moment because of this plane crash in Tehran, and come to find out there's 63 Canadian nationals who are on board, and you wrote a column. We'll digress for a moment. You wrote a column about this 15-year-old girl who was on the plane. Poor thing. She's trying to, do things with her life, and she's on the plane and never makes it.
Yeah, it's bothered me. All night it bothered me. I mean, obviously there's lots of stories like this on the plane. Every one of them are regular people. But she came to Canada. She doesn't speak a word of English. And, it's a Canadian story. She came in 2016. But her principal, really, I mean, usually when you go to a school and there's been something happen, they're kicking you off the property and all that. This guy was different. He talked about her ambition and her work ethic and her dreams and the kind of person that she was and, just what she would have contributed to Canada and the world. And, it broke my heart. And to think that, and this is, I love United States and, big time. But I'm telling you, like the fact that nobody, for the president or Nancy Pelosi, all these people are not talking about this plane crash and looking at it as an act of war. I'm not saying it is, but it sure as hell looks like it.
Well, doesn't it? It seems as though something stupid happened from the time that they were launching missiles to when this plane took off.
It appears there's signs of things got shot down.
Right, and I'm hoping, and it seems to be the case, that they're trying to push them for greater, if not accountability, then more chances to investigate. Because what was it? Within minutes, I think the Iranian government said, "Nah, it was a mechanical failure," and that just didn't sound right.
And this is what bothers me. is the fact that there's so much talk about all the rest of it, the terrorists that they killed and the base and all the different things. Every inch of that is investigated. And yet, right in front of our eyes, this happens. And, we're not aviation experts, but I've been a reporter for 35 years, so I've seen a few things. And that smells, that whole thing. And if it's because there was no Americans on board, if that's the reason that they don't talk about it, then that, it's time for a gut check, because, there's Canadians on board, and they're listening to this show right now. They do every day. And so, and obviously we're allies. So, so I'd like to see that rectified, and I think the pressure needs to be put on Iran to release those black boxes, send in the very best people that know how to investigate this, and no spin and no nonsense, because, as you mentioned, Maya, 15 years old, and there's so many other stories like that. And the other thing, too, is, and this is most important to America, is that the motive very well may have been because they thought there was Americans on that flight. And the most famous story of all was out of Tehran when the Canadian, Ambassador Ken Taylor helped sneak out the American hostages in 1979. And, the story, Ben Affleck movie and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that could be in the motive, too. So anyway, I digress, but I am upset about it, and I guess we all are. And I'm going to be going. We're working on the vigil for tonight and all that. So we're suffering here, but it's a punch in the gut. I mean, obviously, the whole world has got to stop doing this. And this young girl, just look at her story. And there's also a dentist on board that her husband was going to the airport to meet her, and everything like that. It's just horrible.
Yeah, no doubt. Our condolences to you and to those who are lost as well. That's
all of Canada.
Yeah, that is not an easy thing. And I know that if anybody wanted to see more about what you wrote about this 15-year-old girl who was on the plane, check the Toronto Sun this morning and Joe Warmington and his story. Joe, one of the things that and I'm not sure if you're still ready to talk much about it, but I just wanted to ask you quickly about.
Let's talk about it. Sure.
Yeah, the movie Don't F with Cats, and how you sort of stumbled onto Luca before he actually murdered somebody in Montreal, and that's sort of this pivot point in the movie. A lot of people have watched it, and you sort of had this interaction with him, and it seemed unnerving because he wasn't quite right. What was your reaction when you met the guy?
Well, it was 5 years before the murder, so there's quite a few years. But I think in some ways, I whether I helped fuel this narcissism or what have you, I don't know. At that time, I wrote a column called Night Scrawler, which was a street column, and I'm more of a city columnist now. But at that time, I would interview characters in the street, drug addicts and, prostitutes and homeless people, the cop on the beat, regular people out in nightclubs, all of that. So it didn't really kind of this kind of character like Luca Magnotta. I had written about characters like that before. So I say that as a caveat just because people wonder, why did you write about this guy? Well, that's why, because I wrote about those kind of guys. And I heard him on the radio, on a radio show like yours the night before, and he was going on about how he had nothing to do with Carla Homolka, and everybody's saying that he was dating her. Carla Homolka is obviously Paul Bernardo's wife, and that was like they call the Ken and Barbie killers. 3 young girls, 14 and 15 were, obviously murdered, and all the rest that goes with that. So that's why I tracked him down. He invited me to go to where he was staying or whatever apartment, and I declined on that, but he came into the Sun building and we interviewed him there and we videoed him. And then I decided, because he was just so troubled, that, maybe by doing a story it would help him and somebody would see in his family or whatever that he needs help. I even said that in the column. And of course, I never heard of him again. I went on to do, I do 300 things a year. And until that day, my wife was pregnant, and, she was in pain and kind of fell asleep, and then woke up to my BlackBerry, and there was like 100 messages saying Luca Magnotta on it. I knew something had happened. And there it was. I mean, the whole story unfolded. And I'm not saying that, I did not think that he was violent. It didn't occur to me, but I knew he was creepy and troubled. I thought maybe stoned or off his meds or all of the above.
I wonder, and this was the question I had for you. You know, if you watch the movie, these internet sleuths are trying to catch who they think is a cat killer, and soon to realize, well, might be his next step. People who torture animals may end up being serial killers, so try to catch them. They go to the Toronto police, and they give all this information to the Toronto police. This is the guy. This is where he lives. This is his apartment building. This is all the stuff they found out. And the Toronto police kind of sat on it. What's your thoughts on that? Is that asking too much of the Toronto police to know, to look ahead, to try and at least talk to this guy and say, what's your problem?
Well, I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but you could say they dropped the ball on it. We've had cases where we've had missing women, and the former boyfriend comes and points the finger. This is the Dell Millard case. It's, they make another documentary that somebody should do. And the police dropped the ball on that. Even in this case here, when they had the lunatic with the ice pick video, there was people from the United States phoning the Toronto police and the RCMP and everything else. And no one seemed to be interested in it. It's a big city here, and there's a lot of cranks, I guess. But I think there's another thing at play, and I do agree with you that this should have been handled differently. And that is the fact that the social media part of policing at that time, we're going back 10, 12, 13 years, was basically non-existent. And now they're right up to speed on it. They've got officers dedicated to it. And so they didn't really understand. You've got a 30-year veteran sergeant answering the phone, and, it takes 20 calls like that a night. And, not to defend the sergeant, but you get the point. I mean, it's easy for us to say, they've got to weed through which ones are real, which ones aren't. Most of them are bogus. So I think that's what happened here. But in retrospect, and Monday morning quarterbacking, obviously it's easy to say, well, it should have been done. But there was a lot of things. But this guy was able to move around. I mean, he got away with a lot for a long time. And, he did things that are the catch me if you can kind of thing. And I always wondered if he had help. And I think that, I'm not comfortable that he did all this without some sort of assistance.
Interesting. Joe Warmington, I'm from the Toronto Sun. I'm just thinking about this. We often look at Toronto, from our vantage point, and Canada as a whole as a generally happy, safe country, and is for the most part. But we forget that Toronto's a big city sometimes. And with a big city comes a whole lot of seedy, dark underbelly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like for the longest time you've been on that beat. Oh, the things you must see, Joe.
It's not really a safe city. I mean, in the last 2 years, we've had in the Greater Toronto area 300 homicides. So we get away with it. In fact, we look down our nose at places like Buffalo and say, well, that's more violent, or places like Detroit or Chicago. But we're really the same thing. In Mississauga, which is the suburb you drive through if you're coming on the Queen Elizabeth Way, QEW in here, we had 31 homicides. That's the suburban, neighborhood. 31 homicides.
Yeah,
that's suburbs. Yeah, wow.
And we had, I think the number was 76 in Toronto. Last year was 96. But we had record shootings. So make no mistake, this is a big city with a gang problem. Lots of different ways of, looking at it, what the solutions are. The main one is not the guns. I mean, people want to ban guns and all that stuff. That's not going to do anything because the guns come from the United States across the border every day. They come from legal areas where you're allowed to have them. Here, you're not allowed to have them. But the gangsters don't care. The problem is the bail. One of the main problems is that you do a shooting now or you have a gun, you're on bail that week. And, there's nobody to go and make sure that you're following those bail conditions. There's only one officer for every 10,000 people out. So, they just, what I mean? What could happen. So that's what's, the reality here. It's still a great city. I mean, obviously people come from Buffalo all the time, whether it's for the Blue Jays or, to go out for dinner. You're basically safe. But if you look at it, there's been a lot of shootings in the entertainment district. There's been shootings and murder in restaurants, everything where you would go. And I covered the Anchor Bar shooting a couple of years ago where there was a murder there. There's a couple of Toronto police officers that helped solve that. That shocked me because I go to the Anchor Bar all the time. You imagine someone from Buffalo coming down and sitting in a nice restaurant and having that happen right in front of them in Toronto. You wouldn't think it, but it's real.
Yeah. Joe Warmington's on. He's from the Toronto Sun, and we were talking about Don't F with Cats, although some people from Buffalo also go to see Cats up in Toronto, or at least they used to at one time.
different scenario.
I know it. Look, our condolences, and if you want to check out a little bit more about this plane crash and how it's impacting people in Canada and the importance of it, you can check Joe's column out about this poor 15-year-old who lost her life on that plane. Joe, thanks for coming on the show. We'll
thanks
talk
for
to
your
you soon.
insight, Joe.
Yeah, really important.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and all the best. And I'm to leave on a sort of positive note. I think I'm still hurting over the Bills loss, but I think I see good things in the future. So let's hope that we're talking Super Bowl next year.
Nice.
All right. Way to leave it on a positive. I like it.
Damn right. Joe, take care of yourself, man. We'll talk to you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
There you go. Joe Warmington from the Toronto Sun. All right. And it sounds like he's a Bills fan, which is pretty hilarious.